Are there any like engagements that stand out in your mind from the first deployment? I mean, because obviously there's the whole deployment was probably full of different things that occurred. Is there any moments that were
Yeah.
like, wow, that was that was crazy,
Um, yeah, I mean, we had so at Fobneria, I mean, it was the Wild West. The first firefight that we really got into there was April 3rd, 2010. It was one of my buddy from back home's birthday, so I'll never forget it. Plus, it was a warm welcoming from the Taliban or whoever was shooting at us to the AO because we had kind of been operating closely to our patrol base, and this was the first time we'd pushed out into the it was Tango 24 sector. And I remember walking through the village, and it was the first time that I'd really noticed that it was dead quiet. Like this is one of those times where the streets were empty and there wasn't anybody out. And for the
Mm-hmm.
few weeks that we've been pushing around, I hadn't seen that yet. So something right out of the gate kind of caught my eye. Like, yeah, it's a little bit quiet. And I put some pictures on Instagram of that patrol, and you can see in the pictures it's just us in the street. I mean, it's me and a couple guys in front of me, and it's just nothing but dead silence. And I think I got a few more snaps from that picture where from that patrol where it's like just people are creaking out the door. So you kind of had this weird feeling, and it got to the point where about halfway through the village, we had an elder come out. He's an older gentleman. He came out and he said, "You guys need to leave now." And we're like, "What?" And so he kept saying it, and this was through the interpreter. He wasn't speaking plain English or anything. He came up to the interpreter and, "Hey, you guys need to leave. You need to leave." And we're like, "We're not leaving." So we continued our patrol. We really didn't have much further to go just based on the route that we had already planned. We weren't going to the edge of that village, but we were going to cut through and pop back out in a field. And that's what we ended up doing. And we got across the first field when we started taking fire. And it erupted out of nowhere. We started taking it from two different sides. I remember twice on that deployment, I jumped on the wrong side of the ditch. This was one of them. I jumped on the right, everybody else jumped on the left. So I had to sit there for a minute until they gained fire superiority, and I jumped back over. And this is when I actually still had my saw. I think I had it for this one because I remember being on my back in this ditch, and there was this little parapet, like little dog houses, we call them, on top of the mud hut. Some of them were 2-story where the stairwell came out to the roof. And it looked like we were taking fire out of there. I could see the dirt kind of kicking out of the windows up there. So I just, on my back, I was laying on my back in the ditch. I had my bipods on my knees, which is something I never trained for, but I just threw my bipods up on my knees. And I started rocking that thing, and then everybody else was shooting. We had a bunch of guys shooting behind us, and then a couple guys lobbing 203s up in that doghouse. And getting out of that one, it kind of got quiet enough where we had to make a decision on whether we were going to push in or push out. So we made the decision to start pulling back through the field, pushing away from the village, just because we as far as we could tell, they definitely had us on two sides, and we didn't know if they were working towards a third one. So we
Mm-hmm.
wanted to push out of there. And in all due fairness or credit to the Marine Corps, I never thought I'd dig a fighting hole, which I did on the outskirts of the city. We dug actual no shit fighting holes, and I never thought I'd actually do bounding and Overwatch, and we sure as shit did. The whole I'm up, they see me, I'm down, and I didn't think I was going to do that. And that firefight we had to in order to get out of there, and we eventually pulled back out. So that one was the first. That wasn't the first time, my first firefight. That would probably be, I think, my third by that point. But that was the first one where it was like, oh, the odds are not in our favor on this one, right out the gate at least.
Mm-hmm.
So that one was pretty eye opening. Um, we had a few other ones where there was one at night, and we were shooting back and forth with these guys, and we were watching tracers go overhead. And I just remember somebody, I don't remember who it was. I just remember somebody behind me saying, "It's pretty crazy that that's like every fourth round." As you're watching these tracers zip by, and you're like, "That is every fourth round. Like, where are the other three right now?" Because it was pitch black, you couldn't see shit.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay. So that was kind of another eye-opening experience. Is like just wondering where those other three were out of all these bursts. Um, and then as far as firefights go, we had a guy get hit, Kruger. It was a through and through went through, I think it was his right ass cheek or something, but they ended
Oh,
up taking contact. I
fuck.
wasn't on the patrol, but I took every QRF mission. I basically volunteered for everything. My family would hate me if they ever heard any of this, but I volunteered for everything I could. QRF, any mission, whatever. I just like going out and doing it. So we heard the initial burst go off, and it was they started the ambush with an IED, and they actually triggered it a little bit too soon. Fortunately for us, it didn't get any of our guys, but they did open up with a couple bursts of machine gun. I think it was RPK. Two RPK nests opened up at the same time as the explosion, and one of the raking fires ended up catching Kruger in the ass cheek. So on this one, we had to get a QRF together real quick. At this time, we were kind of used to it. We were pretty. It was pretty hot around us as far as we were constantly QRF for other people or reacting to other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we pretty much always had our gear staged by the back door. So we got a QRF rolling. We're rolling out there, and it was probably, I don't know, half mile or so, maybe a mile. As soon as we got to the first big crossing to where we could kind of see them where they were pinned down at, we started getting, I don't think they were direct shots at us, but we were starting to catch the residual shots. So we started at that point, we had to kind of make our way up a little bit more careful. And I remember looking, we had to make a pass through this big open field, and we thought that we started taking contact from the right. So I remember as I'm sitting there running, I had the 203 on this one. I'm sitting there running, and I mean, we were just lobbing 203s off to our right flank just because we really didn't know. We felt pretty comfortable that it was coming from over in that direction because the team that we were running towards was straight ahead of us, and we knew that the enemies that had engaged them were directly behind them, so we couldn't engage them, but we were just kind of keeping our eyes off to make sure that nobody was going to come around. Um, so we ended up pushing to the tree line adjacent to the injured Marine, and they popped the smoke in between us, our unit, and their unit. And this time, they're still taking and returning fire. And when that helo came in, I've never seen a more concentrated volume of fire in a single direction on the enemy's behalf, at least. As far as soon as that bird landed, it just felt like every gun in the place turned to them.
Hmm.
And they were still shooting SMAs. I think they had a SMA with them. They were still lobbing SMAs and laws at the Taliban, and they were still trying to get shots off on this bird. They ended up making it out there good. Kruger got out fine. He ended up healing up all right. But coming back from that one, we were a little bit more stressed out. That was the first casualty that we had taken from our fob. So that one kind of had us a little bit more on edge. And that was kind of like, okay, we can't all be lucky every day. And so that was, again, another, just deployment to me was just nothing but eye openers. It's just every day was something opening my eyes a little bit differently. And that day, we'd already obviously lost a few guys prior to that, but that was the first time that we had a guy get hit from ours. So everybody
Mm-hmm.
was a little bit more high strung after that. So that one was memorable.
Was that common, a sustained firefight like that? Because a lot of times when I was over there, it seemed most of the times they just want to take a couple pot shots at you and then bound off between the tree lines so you can't find them.
Yeah. That one was definitely longer, and I think it's because they knew that they had gotten one of our guys and that we were going to be bringing air, so they were
Mm-hmm.
definitely willing to stick it out and fight. Because I think that the intel that we had gotten after the fact from talking to locals was that that was actually like that was a small unit. That was a small Taliban unit that was traveling in a pack. I think it was like eight. I think they were traveling on two motorcycles or a few motorcycles. And they had been coming in and out of that tree line for about a week. And then we found all this out after the fact. They're like, yeah, they've been coming. They sit here every day for a week. And then at 4 o'clock, they clock out like a day shift and head back home. And then they come in at 8 and they just sit there and wait. Um, so so yeah, they were waiting for us, and they'd been waiting for us. So we kind of,
Crazy.
yeah. So it was so knowing that and that they had the IED, they had at least two belt feds, and then whatever other small arms they had. So they were ready for a longer one on that one. The only other longer one that I remember, which was another very memorable moment in that deployment, was we had a unit that was as far out on RAO as you could be, and pretty much was as isolated as you can be on the very outskirts of where we knew it was pretty much their territory, being the Taliban or whoever.
Mm-hmm.
We knew it was theirs. and we really didn't go over there too much. And these guys were pushing that boundary, and they ended up getting pinned down. And this was another one of those things where it's just like, I'll never forget the radio calls of them basically being like, "Hey, we're running out of water, we're running out of ammo. Like, when is help coming?" Our mobile section was too busy at the Fob Marjah in the center of the city, like getting mail or some shit. With there's yeah, if you ever talked to any of the Nuria guys, there's some resentment with the mobile crew. Um, and then everybody else, so like they were just so far out there that there was no realistic option. That was one of the only, I think that was one of two mortar missions that we were actually approved of that entire deployment for any of the guys I was with. We only shot two mortars that entire pump from Fob Naria.
Wow, really?
And yeah, that's how tight the ROEs were. That tight. We had almost zero air support. We had no real arty. We couldn't even drop mortar. Like I said, we had a 60 permanently set up, and we dropped two mortars. One of them went off, and then on our adjustment, the second round ended up landing in the mud and didn't go off. So after that, they ended up calling because these guys were so far out that we couldn't even lob them out there. I have a video of it that I'll probably post at some point, but you can see when the round goes off that we're just barely clearing the ESCO. I mean, we were trying to get that thing out as far as we could, and we couldn't get it out to them. So at that point, we ended up getting ready to do our QRF. And we started pushing out, and we had heard that one of their guys had shut down. He'd hit that black zone. He'd kind of been like, "Hey, this is it for me." And it was nothing against him. Totally understand. You know, when you hit that point, you hit that point. So they were already down a guy. They were running low on ammo. They were running low on water, and they got lucky. I mean, I don't know what happened, whether they ended up killing all the guys. I don't think so. I think the Taliban ended up running out of ammo and then just left. But it was getting close for those guys. I just remember sitting there listening to the radio, like, okay, we need to get moving. And
That's crazy, man.
It worked out. So
That's crazy that you're saying that you guys had a hard time getting air support or fire support, because of the ROEs. Because I would have thought, during that time, around the invasion time, or the pushing of Marjah and then the cleanup afterwards, trying to gain those footholds, I would have thought that fires would have been in use quite a bit, especially like HIMARS and mortars and stuff. Well, especially mortars, because you can approve them at the battalion level. For those that may not realize, the way it works is the fire support assets have different levels of approval. So 81 millimeter mortars and below can be approved at the battalion level. So the battalion commander, the battalion operations officer, and the XO, the executive officer, can approve that. They could also, when I was there, they could also approve standard artillery rounds, like, Illum and even standard HE, which kind of blew my mind. But if you wanted to get precision guided munitions, like HIMARS or the what's it called? I can't believe I forgot it. The GPS. The GPS guided artillery round, Excal, the Excalibur rounds.
Excal, yep.
And air support, that all had to be approved by the regiment. Well, the air support didn't have to be. That could be approved at the battalion as well. But like PGMs, like the HIMARS and Excal, had to be approved by regiment for some reason, which was really weird until we got that switch to where the battalion could approve HIMARS. I think we fired the first one when I was there with 3-6 for the battalion approval. Wow. But it was like, I thought when you guys were there that it was a little bit more loose and it had been restricted, as time goes on. Obviously, it gets more and more restricted when incidents occur. I didn't realize it was like that when you were there as well.
Oh, no. It was, we all joked about it, talked about it, but it was tight. It was so tight. And that was kind of my senior guys, and I think that was different for them, is they were used to having that support, and we really didn't have it on this one. I remember, their ROEs were a lot looser in Garmser than they were in us, because we were really going into that whole hearts and minds, democracy in a box, and we were really pushing that, which was a great concept until you actually start getting in there and doing it. And really, being a part of that operation was obviously something phenomenal and a definite life experience, but the way that it was gone about being done was just, we didn't really clear the city. We just kind of pushed into the middle of it, got surrounded, and spent 7 months fighting our way from our own patrol bases and back. The whole hearts and minds thing really kind of screwed us over just because we weren't able to actually clear it properly. and the ROEs were so tight in every aspect that we couldn't get approved for mortars. We couldn't get approved. Shit, I think I saw maybe one A10 gun run in our little AO be done.
Hmm.
We didn't have had no RD. Uh, we
That's
had
crazy.
probably several drone strikes on guys that were placing IEDs, but
Mm-hmm.
as most of the guys that they saw placing IEDs, they would send us out after them. They didn't drop bombs. We would have to go get them because they didn't want to.
What?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's
I,
crazy.
I can recall several patrols where we would get the, hey, they're putting them in now, go get them. And a couple of them were at night, a couple of them were during the day. So
I mean, if you're
yeah,
like,
they wouldn't drop them.
if they're putting them in so close where you can quickly get out and get the guy, but normally they're in and out. Like they're efficient. They're very efficient putting in those IEDs. So that's crazy because we would use. I mean, fuck, man, we did HIMARS. We did HIMARS strikes on guys. We did air strikes on guys. If they were putting in an IED and like we could tell that's what it was, that was it. That met the intent, the hostile
Oh yeah,
intent for the rules
absolutely.
of engagement. Well, where we ran into issues for us in 2011 and really 2013 is if someone walked into a compound or to a tree line and you couldn't see them for a second, well, then you can no longer confirm
Yes.
that that's the person.
Yeah.
You had to reconfirm that's the right person, or hey, they're in a tree line. Well, there could be other people in the tree line, so we can't strike that tree line unless we know there's no one else in it. And it's like, I mean, I don't know, man.
Oh,
If I'm just a
it's
regular guy not doing anything wrong, I'm probably not hanging out in a tree line with guys shooting machine guns. You know what I'm saying? Like, I
yeah,
don't know.
exactly. Exactly. And no, and that was like really one of the bigger frustrations is we were just there were so many times where our hands were tied behind our back. I remember before we even got in the city, we were on the outskirts. We were in that Fiddler's Green AO. And this was after we had lost Smith and Angus. I remember sitting up on post, and I mean, I saw this guy just